and one of the favorite examples that you like to use is there a time when the rape of a woman is acceptable? Well, my answer to that would be, well, let's bring up like a major moral issue, which is abortion, between the choice of a woman and the life of a child. Like, how do you determine which one is right based on moral absolutes?
But what a moral relativist cannot say is, what you say is really absolutely wrong.
Welcome to the best debates Cliffe has ever had on Give Me an Answer. In this debate, Cliffe talks with a person who claims to be a moral relativist and explains why he doesn't believe this philosophy is right and why he doesn't subscribe to it. All credit goes to Cliffe and Stuart Netchell and Give Me an Answer. Enjoy.
A lot of things, because I've heard you over here for the last couple of days, and a lot of things that you base yourself up on is moral absolutism. So, in fact, I do consider myself a moral relativist. So, obviously, because I'm a moral relativist, I do not need God in my life. So, so then I just have a couple of questions that I want to direct towards you concerning moral relativism. Okay, you say morality is absolute, but my first question to you is, and one of the favorite examples that you like to use is there a time when the rape of a woman is acceptable? Well, my answer to that would be, well, not more than a couple of centuries ago, raping of a woman was considered to be spoils of war, which meant that until somebody stood up and said, hey, we should not do this anymore, raping of a woman for spoils of war was considered an acceptable practice. So my question to you is if morality is absolute, then why does it change?
Great question. When I say that there are a few moral absolutes, I am not saying that everybody follows those absolutes. Obviously, God has given us a free will, which means that obviously we can rationalize evil, or we can accept our society's definition that rape is okay as a spoil of war, or slavery is okay because it greases the economic wheels of our culture. But that doesn't change the fact that we have consciences that tie us into objective morals. And the only way there can be an objective moral is if there is some mind prior to the human mind that has defined what that moral is. If there's no mind prior to the human mind who defines what objective morality is, then it's obviously people who define morality, which means it's relative depending upon which person you're talking to.
Okay, then, but then you seem to talk from a perspective where you're saying, but I have reached this moral absolute. Or, my question to you is then, what keeps people, like, decades from now looking back upon this time period and saying, that person was not living out what's morally absolute? What keeps them from doing that? Because at this time period of a couple of centuries ago where that was a accepted practice, people didn't think of it as anything wrong. So obviously you don't think of some of the things that you support as wrong. So what keeps people from saying that in the future?
Okay, I am convinced that just because I don't think something's wrong does not make it wrong. In other words, I'm convinced that I don't create reality. The challenge for me is to get in touch with reality. Let's say that I think that racism is good. That doesn't make racism good, just because I think that. My thoughts can be wrong. I am convinced that all people have equal value, but all ideas do not have equal value. Some ideas are true, other ideas are false. And the idea that racism is good, I am convinced, is a false idea. Wrong idea.
Okay. But then, so then in that context, so let's bring up like a major moral issue, which is abortion, between the choice of a woman and the life of a child. Like, how do you determine which one is right based on moral absolutes?
Okay, great example. Abortion. If abortion is simply removing excess skin, I think it's hard to make a case that abortion is wrong. If abortion is murdering a child, I think the majority of us would agree that murdering children is not good. So the first thing you have to do is you have to answer the question, what is abortion? Is it simply removing excess skin? Nothing wrong with that. I peel my calluses, you cut your fingernails and toenails all the time. Nothing wrong with removing excess skin. Or is abortion terminating a human life motivated by inconvenience? Then, if you conclude that abortion is murdering a child, then you've got to ask yourself, is murder wrong? Now, I am convinced to the root of my being that murder is absolutely evil. And therefore, I don't care how many people want to tell me that murder's right, I'm convinced it's absolutely evil. So that's how I think through that. Does that make any sense?
Okay, sure. But I'm still kind of not convinced that there are absolute morals. So, because the idea of God fails when there is no absolute morals. So, how can you convince me that there's absolute morals?
All right. The way that I reach the point of being convinced that there are absolute morals is to try and live out moral relativism.
Okay.
If you believe that morality is relative, live it out.
Okay.
Which means, when someone steals your money,
Right.
don't look at them and say, you should not have stolen my money. Instead say to them, from my perspective, it's wrong that you stole my money, but obviously from your perspective, it was just fine for you to steal my money. I'm not absolutely right, you're not absolutely wrong. It's all relative. Get married. And when your wife looks you in the face and says something very cutting, very mean, don't look at her and say, you know, that was really mean. Instead say, well, from my perspective, that was not a very nice thing to say, but I realize that it's all relative, and therefore, what will be will be.
I'm going to disagree with that because I don't think relativism as a laws of moral is a call to action. More or less, I think it's more of like a sense of awareness where you say people have different moral values. However, that does not necessarily mean I have to stand up like that. I have to defend other people's moral views. If my moral views conflict with other people's moral views, I can still very much say I don't agree with you, and I'm going to act in a way that I don't agree with you. That doesn't mean relativism is wrong. It's just saying I disagree with you.
Sure, I agree. I'm right with you. You're right. A moral relativist can look at someone else and say, I don't agree with you. But what a moral relativist cannot say is, what you say is really absolutely wrong.
Right.
Instead, a moral relativist has to acknowledge whatever my position is regarding murder, child molestation, and rape, the opposite position of whatever it is I hold is equally valid. The opposite is equally valid because it's all relative.
Right. But that doesn't mean I have to stand up for it. Like, I could still say it's equally valid, but since it disagrees with my own, I'm going to fight for my own values. And that does not necessarily mean my morals are absolute. I'm just fighting for what I believe in.
Yeah, well, why would you fight for a relative moral?
Well, my own morals. I'm not fighting for relative morals. I'm fighting for my own morals.
Yeah, but if you believe that your own morals are relative, why would you want to fight for them?
Because things that I consider immoral are not beneficial to me. They cause me pain and they cause me suffering, so I'm obviously going to try to defend myself for self-preservation.
Yeah, but obviously morality goes beyond just self-preservation. Obviously, if your wife is mean to you, it's not going to destroy you, okay? You're still going to live. All right, so why on earth would you confront your wife with, that is not a good way to have a relationship. To speak to each other in such a demeaning, degrading way is not very good. So why would you try and push that? Isn't that rather arrogant?
Sure.
So, I mean, if you honestly believe that all morality is relative, then someone might make a mistake in murdering somebody, but it's just a mistake. Now, maybe you want to imprison those people who make mistakes, but it's all relative, so it's not something you should be getting too upset about.
Well, I mean, if I value human life, and if that's my own morals, and if somebody murders somebody that I value, that's obviously going to affect me and cause me to act in a way.
Yeah, but why do you value human life? What's the basis of the value of human life?
Because I'm choosing to value them.
Good. So you're choosing to value human life, and I'm choosing to help the communist dream come about, and in order to do that, I've got to slaughter a few million Russians in order to kick out the czars and have the communist dream, which will provide the most amount of good for the most amount of people. So
Right.
That's my trip. I'm not right, you're not right, I'm not wrong, you're not wrong. It's all relative from your worldview.
Right, but I can still fight for what I believe. That doesn't mean I have to stand up for what you're doing just because it's relative.
Well, yeah, you can fight for what you believe, or you can just lie down. It really doesn't matter.
Okay, but I'm still going to choose to fight. So then how, if I still choose to fight for what I believe, and thus I overcome whatever you believe, then like does what I believe become morally absolute, or does it like?
No, it doesn't become morally absolute. That's a great point. So you and I disagree morally, and we go to war,
Okay.
and one of us wins, and the other one dies. So now the question is morality defined by power? You've won, I'm dead. So does that mean that right and justice are defined by who wins the war? If the Nazis would have won World War II, would that make anti-Semitism good and right?
I mean, from their perspective, there was nothing wrong with it. From my perspective, there is something wrong with it. So, I mean, we're still just disagreeing.
Exactly. But the question is there, when we say that anti-Semitism is wrong, is that just a biased perspective? Or are we tying into reality that anti-Semitism really is absolutely wrong?
I think it's a biased perspective.
Exactly. That's what the position of relativist is. You think it's a biased perspective. I don't think you really can live that out. Let's say you have a little child, and let's say that someone abuses that child. I don't think you're going to be willing to say, well, from my perspective that's wrong, but I'm only relatively correct, so I understand that it might be right what you did when you abused my child. I think you're going to act as if the abuse of my child was absolutely evil and perverted, and I'm going to go after you with everything I can.
I mean, like, I'm still realizing that that person's moral values said that there's nothing wrong with raping a child, but since they contradicted my own moral views, but yes, and since it was my child, I'm going to go with everything I have against it. It's not because I'm saying what I believe is absolute. It's saying what I believe and what you believe conflict each other, and you cause me an inconvenience. So thus, I'm going to go after you.
Right. But I think that the passion with which you go after me for abusing your child contradicts your relativism. I think the passion that you go after me with when I abuse your child communicates that your child really does have worth and value, and when I abused your child, that was absolutely evil. I think if you're going to be a consistent moral relativist, you're going to have to be less committed to your position, because you realize that your position and the position opposite of your position are equally valid.
I mean, but then it would probably be different for me if it was like some random child that I did not know. If I heard a story of a child that was physically abused, and I'd probably be pretty upset about it. But if it was my child, then that changes things.
Right. Which I think is the argument of the Darwinists, right? That the reason you will protect your child is simply because of a biological tie.
Yeah.
And I would insist baloney. I would insist that although the biological tie is definitely real and definitely there is more to my love for my child than simply a biological drive. There is the ability to love. I think the proof of that is the ability to be a deadbeat dad. I don't have to be a loving dad. I can be a deadbeat dad, and I can be abusive if I want to of my children. Or I can choose to be a loving father. So I don't think I have to love my children. I think all of us are too keenly aware of fathers who do not care for their children. They're deadbeat dads. I've been invited to University of Texas by a group of students called the Hill House students to speak for a few minutes on issues from a biblical perspective, and then to open it up for question, answer, agreement, disagreement, wherever you all are coming from. In Matthew chapter 6, beginning at verse 25, Jesus says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? And who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? See how the lilies of the field grow? They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." You're under stress. You're under pressure, and stress results. I'm under pressure, and stress results. Jesus Christ says, "Come to me. Don't turn to an addiction. Don't turn to alcohol. Don't turn to drugs. Don't turn to obsessive behavior. Instead, Christ says, come to me. I am the God who loves you. I'm all powerful. Trust in me and allow me to replace worry with peace. Allow me to replace stress with deep security. Where do you get your security from? Where do you get your understanding of your worth, significance, and value as a human being? There are obviously many worldview options. You can be a materialist and you can reduce all of reality to matter. And then you can live for money, you can live for a job, and that can be the basis of your worth, your ability to climb the corporate ladder, your ability to get a higher paying job. That's faith. You can turn to the faith of empiricism and you can say, my life is based on my senses, what I can see, smell, taste, hear, and touch. That's my reality. Jesus Christ says there's more to reality. There's an unseen God who created you, who loves you, and when you put him in the foundation of your life, that leads to peace.